Sacrifice is giving up what you love for something that you love more. It's not that you don't love it, you love it more. Yeah. My heart broke when I left the summit. You know, I mean, I wept over that. I had many goodbyes over that. I had been there for 5 years. We had invested our whole life, you know, just all in for 5 full years. And yet I was excited for what was coming next to plant. And I think some of that, we see that with our group leaders. It's like they're putting that comfort and preference and all that stuff down on the table, and yet God's moving them and they're excited about what's coming next, you know, but they've got to make that decision to put that stuff down and lay it down and say, hey, the mission is bigger, becoming all that God has for me to be is bigger.
You know, every time that I've had a group that's multiplied, I think my favorite part of it is when the apprentice gets ready to leave and we commission them out and able to cast the vision to the rest of the group that is, hey, they are leaving the community that we've all had here together and enjoyed to go create this same kind of community for people that don't have it yet.
Right.
And when they begin to connect the dots with that, that's what leads to all the other yeses down the road.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
Well, hey, welcome back to the Breaking Barriers podcast. My name is Jonathan Yarboro, here with Mercy Hill Church, and today having a conversation with lead pastor Andrew Hopper. And wanting to tag into a conversation that Bobby and I had on a former episode. We were talking about the relationship between creating opportunities for leadership in the church and also how that goes with a development strategy, you know, for developing leaders within the church, and how those two things kind of feed each other, and, you know, how that creates kind of different cultures. The way that we talked about that was we said, you know, a lot of churches will lean hard into the whole development strategy, some kind of like development pipeline, and how they go about preparing leaders to jump into space, but they may not have any opportunities, or at least not many opportunities for them to actually jump in and use the things they've learned along the pipeline, and how that can create a really slow organization, you know, where people don't have any way to jump in. But then on the other side, some churches, you know, they'll create a lot of opportunities because whether they're fast growing or something like that, but they don't ever do anything to really develop the leaders. And it's sort of like you throw somebody into the deep end and, hey, it's like sink or swim kind of time. And you don't really do anything to help them. And that can be kind of destructive, you know, to the church, massively stressful. And we talked about how when you combine both of those things, it can create a sending culture as opposed to a really stressed out culture that's always trying to recoup the loss, or a culture that's just really slow because it's bloated with so many leaders that aren't actually leading anything.
Right.
And so talking about that, you know, we kind of landed in this space of it's better when you're trying to get to a sending culture from not having anything like that. You want to lean first into the stress that creates the opportunity, and then you want to develop the leaders as they step into those opportunities. So a lot of churches will kind of lean the other way, but we have found that, you know, it's better when you're leaning into the creating opportunities first. People step into leadership. They may not be prepared at the outset, but then we can do the work of getting them ready to go. And I just, you know, before we get into talking about some of this stuff in more details, you got anything in there that you'd want to add?
Yeah, I think that you guys were right. Like one of them I think does go first. And a lot of the ways that we used to talk about this in church planning world is just the leadership vacuum that is created when churches are planted. I think that's actually true on down the system. And I think we're going to talk about some of that today. Whether you're planting a group, or whether you're planting a service, or whether you're planting a campus, or whether you're planting a group, the very action of planting and multiplying things, it pushes leaders out and thereby creates a vacuum of leadership that has a force to it. I mean, it sucks people in. You know, that's why we call it vacuum. So, if the development side is not there, and I think we've done a lot of work with pipelines and that kind of thing, I think it's very important. If the development side is not there, you can end up really throwing some people into some places that maybe they weren't equipped for. But without that pull, without the vacuum, I don't know that people are ever going to even see their own need to be serving in the church, because they don't see opportunities for them to plug in that are needed. People understand and know intuitively, I think many times if you're doing something, quote, just to give them a chance to serve versus if it actually is really needed. And I think they attack it with a different energy when they can see very clearly this is a need. We've multiplied services. That means we got to double everything.
Yeah.
And so they need me to step in right now.
Hey, so as a little sidebar to that, it's interesting to me how that correlates to the way that we talk about vision gap. You know, we can say you cast a vision when you're trying to get people to give to something. And if all you're doing is saying, hey, thank you for your generosity, you've given to this, the people that are sitting there that are new to your church, they don't really see a need for them to be able to give because they're saying, hey, this church is already getting it done. They don't need me. And so it correlates here with the way when you do the vision gap. Can you imagine, church, if we were to have this many that were, we increase what we were doing to this, then the people get to see the need. Same thing with this vacuum.
Yeah, if you say thank you, the people that are already in want to run harder.
Yeah.
They want to give more. They want to run harder. When you connect the dots of you're doing this and look at the kingdom impact, it's only natural for those people to say, man, I want to do more, which is good. That's a good thing, right? That's not bad. That's good. The problem is if you stop there, then you've simultaneously thanked people who are already involved, got them to go deeper, and subtly communicated to people who are not involved, we don't need you.
That's right. That's right. Where when you create this vacuum, even in the leadership space, people get taken out. They can see the need. This church needs me.
Yeah, and it's very natural for them, I think, to just get sucked up. I mean, they step in. Then you got to have the development side,
right?
And I mean, but it's that vacuum is powerful because the people that do get sucked in, I mean, if they've got the right stuff and they can run hard, they're gonna learn on the job.
That's right.
But not everybody's wired that way. Some people could be really great if you had a more formal way of developing them, and I think that's why you need both.
Yeah. Hey, so let's jump into like the application of this stuff, like what it actually looks like. So you've been here since the beginning. You started the church, so we're talking about 12 years into this space now, and I think one of the things that jumped out to me when I first got in the Mercy Hill ecosystem was how we talk about groups. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to multiplying groups, what we don't do is we don't say, okay, we're going to split groups in half, and then this you make two groups out of one. Instead, we talk about planting a group. Can you talk about some of the reasoning behind that and how we go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, number one, the group world is one of the first places that people begin to wrestle with the tension of what do I like, what do I think is best for me, versus what's best for the mission and what's best for those who don't know.
That's right.
The gospel yet, or they don't understand church. That is one of it's not the only place, but it's, because sometimes services could be first too, I think. But generally speaking, groups, one of the first places that people really begin to wrestle with that. And the first thing that they want to do is try to grab both.
Yeah.
So if I got a group of 15, man, okay, you're telling me we got to plant for the mission. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab our 4 best relational couples, and we'll hive up and we'll plant. And that makes you feel on the front end like, man, we're going to get both done. We're going to open up some new spots for new people, but in this hive, I'm still going to be safe.
Right.
I'm still going to have my relationships. Now, what people don't realize is, and this is just Sticky Church 101, is that when you have a bunch of existing relationships already within a group, it makes it very hard for new people to come in and stick. This to me, I mean, I lived this world growing up. This is not the only by far. I could probably name a lot, but this is one of the reasons why small churches stay small.
Okay,
because it's the same thing. It's the same idea. If your church is 50, 80, 100 people, when new people come in, that feels like such a hive.
It's hard to break into.
Yeah, everybody there's no spaces where there aren't a bunch of pre-existing relationships and context that you're missing.
It's the same thing when you move to a small town. Yeah. You move to a small town and
very similar.
That kind of situation.
And so why that's one of the reasons why I mean it's weird, but it's why growing churches grow. Because the growing churches have a lot of new people. Well, guess what new people connect to? New people, right? So I understand the initial impulse that a lot of people have with splitting a group right down the middle. Let's say we got a group of 20, make it easy, 10 and 10.
Yep.
But what they don't understand is they took one group that had really good relationships and then made two groups that have good relationships, and now they got two things that are going to exclude people rather than one. So what we try to do is we say new groups for new people. So what we try to do is say, hey, there's going to be a couple that's identified that's raised up. We are constantly, incessantly bothering our group leaders. Our group leader, probably one of the biggest complaints is like, man, we got a good thing going. Why can't we just leave it alone? And what they're going to get from us is that's great. That's fine. Who's your next apprentice?
Right.
Right. Like we need
Right
a name.
on the heels of it. Yeah.
We need a name. So we want to get an apprentice raised up and we want to get them planted out. Many times they will go with at least one other couple that they think might be an apprentice also at some point. But the gist is, man, it's a gospel goodbye. Man, we are sending you out. And I'm not saying we can't do a 4th of July cookout together or whatever, but man, we are sending you out and we're expecting you to form all these new relationships with new people and help them glue to one another. That's pretty much why we don't split. But what I would say is that is a microcosm of what happens at every single level.
That's right. Yeah.
Whether you're planting a church, I mean, when you go plant a church, and I've said this ad nauseum, this is why church planting is not a strategy for, church growth. It can't be because it takes 10 years and you're only going to plant a group of 30 or 40 to go. But that's the thing. You're going to see 30 or 40 people. It's not going to be, hey, we're going to hive off half of the church and send them out in a church plant, Even with a campus, I think people think, well, the campus is like that. It's like, no, it's really not. I mean, the biggest launch team we've ever had for a campus is probably 200, 300, whereas a campus might launch with 700 or 800 people. So it's still the smaller group that's going out to try to provide a ton of room for new people to be able to connect with each other.
All right, so I know it's not something that's just our thing. We didn't coin the phrase, the gospel goodbye and all that kind of stuff. But you said that it's a microcosm of the entire thing. And so can you just talk a little bit about, when we say gospel goodbye, what do we mean by that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know where gospel goodbye came from, but we just there is a healthy thing in growing, sending churches where people have their heart regularly broken with relationships that are going to have to just one day be put back together in heaven for eternity.
Yeah.
It's just the reality of it. I think about my kids, my daughter in particular. She's now had 2 or 3 of her, people that are close to her, youth leaders, people that mentored her, when she was young college students that now have gone. And it's like, man, it's a gospel goodbye. There's tears. There's heartbreak in that, but it's an opportunity for us to say, as much as I love you, and we do believe in a heaven where we're going to be able to enjoy relationship with one another for all eternity. In this short season right now, we are going to, we're going to break fellowship in a sense and send you to India, or you're going to move and you're going to go to our church plant in Norfolk, Virginia,
Yep.
And that the where that starts, I think is what you're referring to. Where that starts is that you start that by planting groups.
Yeah.
When a group plants, or services or campuses. I mean, I think about kids and student ministry and that kind of thing. Man, my kids, for example, some of their best friends go to Regional North.
Yeah.
Well, we don't go to North because we're going to worship as a family, and I can't be there at 2 places at once, right? So that's been hard for them. It's like, hey, we have to say bye to all of these friends that we have that are going to a new campus. Well, let's talk about why that is. Yeah. They're trying to make room at this campus for new people. So it's always that tension of, what I want for me is, man, let's just grab and hoard the relationships. What's good for the kingdom is gospel goodbyes.
We're going to get there to the whole service and campus thing and all that stuff. But I think one of the things that's helpful when we're talking about this is to understand at each level when we're asking people to make some sort of move, they're all making a decision to say goodbye to something, to let go of something. In some way, they're saying, I'm going to let go of a preference that is mine for the sake of someone else. So when it comes to multiplying at the group level and causing that kind of stress, what are people saying yes to?
Yeah. And I think you're right about preference. I think comfort is a big word too, that they're deciding to put the mission over sort of that comfort. I mean, they're saying goodbye to a relationship that they've had.
Right.
They're saying goodbye to a nightly rhythm that they've had. They're saying goodbye to what they've done for their kids' childcare potentially, if depending on what the situation was. And I mean, there's just a lot of things that are unsettling about changing groups. But when you see believers begin to grow, part of that, what marks that maturity is their eyes start to really get up.
Yeah.
And they want to be all that God has called them to be, and so not everybody's going to be a group leader, but for the ones that are group leader material, so to speak, or God's moving them in that, it's kind of fun to see the holy discontent of, I'm willing to put something, what's the nature of sacrifice? What we say at Mercy Hill is sacrifice is giving up what you love for something that you love more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's not that you don't love it, you love it more.
Yeah.
Man, my heart broke when I left the summit. I mean, I wept over that. I had many goodbyes over that. I had been there for 5 years. We had invested our whole life, just all in for 5 full years. And yet I was excited for what was coming next to plant. And I think some of that, we see that with our group leaders. It's like, they're putting that comfort and preference and all that stuff down on the table. And yet God's moving them and they're excited about what's coming next, but they've got to make that decision to put that stuff down and lay it down and say, hey, the mission is bigger. Becoming all that God has for me to be is bigger.
Every time that I've had a group that's multiplied, I think my favorite part of it is when the apprentice gets ready to leave and we commission them out and able to cast the vision to the rest of the group that is, hey, they are leaving the community that we've all had here together and enjoyed to go create this same kind of community for people that don't have it yet.
Right.
And when they begin to connect the dots with that, that's what leads to all the other yeses down the road. So let's shift to some of those other yeses. All right. So when it comes to services, that's a little bigger jump because now you don't just have to have a leader. When you start to shift to having new services, what are some of the things that are required that stress the organization of the church when you get ready to start multiplying services?
So can I say one thing about this?
Sure.
So people who are not watching this on YouTube or whatever, and this is the way my mind works, we're going to build a ladder here.
That's right.
Sort of, right?
Yeah.
A reverse triangle, pyramid kind of thing. But if you just want to think about the ladder, rungs on a ladder.
That's right.
It's going to go groups, services, campuses, church plant, right?
That's right.
All right, so we're building up those 4.
Yep.
And what you're saying is, I mean, and I need to say this. I don't know if you guys, Bobby, said this or not, but I mean, I think you uniquely have packaged this in a way that many church leaders have felt, but have never necessarily said out loud. So, I mean, this is completely proprietary to you. Not that you're going to make any money off of it, but, I mean, it is pretty genius in my opinion. I think when I heard you do this stuff the first time, I was like, oh my gosh, we feel what you're saying, but that's exactly what it is. So, all right, so we talked about groups. You're willing to say goodbye to preference, comfort, nights of the week, all that. Well, now you start talking about services, and it's the same stuff, but it's a little more amped up.
Yeah.
Because now you might even be talking about going to church on a different day.
Yeah.
People don't do that in the South.
That's right.
I don't go to church anytime other than 11 on a Sunday.
That's right.
Now you're talking about, no, we need you to go at night at 5 o'clock on Sunday, or we need you to go at 9, or we need you to go on Thursday. I mean, that kind of idea, different service time. And like I said earlier, man, you're starting to mess with kids' friendships. You're starting to mess with the routines that you guys have about going to Nanny's for lunch after church or getting up at a certain time or all that kind of stuff. You're starting to mess with relational things, friendships that people have. They see the same people at church. I've noticed this at regional campus a lot. I don't think it's wrong by any means. I think it's awesome, actually. But, people that group up in the community, they end up going to the same services. Yeah. That's just what they do. It's like, man, if they golf together, if they do business together, they end up kind of being at the same service together. It's just how it works. And you're saying goodbye to all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're saying yes in a sense to I'm going to put this stuff aside. I'm going to put my preferences, my routines aside, all of that kind of stuff. What's the reason that someone would do that? Yeah,
I love what you said about group because it's the same idea. We're going to create this for people that don't have it.
There it is. Yeah.
And we've tried to do there's two ways, okay, to try to motivate people. Number one, man, you try to give rewards. You try to just sell them on how awesome an off-service time is. It never works, okay? I mean, I'm not saying don't do it, but the way that we have found is man, you just got to go hard in the paint on the mission. And people understand it. Most new people want to come to the live campus in the prime time slot on Sunday morning.
Yeah, that's when they're going to show up.
That is when, that's when most, and we have the data for that. I mean, most first-time guests show up at our largest campus, our live campus, on the prime slot on Sunday morning. That would be like 10 o'clock. We've tried to split the difference. We try to make everybody unhappy. So we do a 9:15 and a 10:45.
So there's not an ideal.
We're trying that because what'll happen is it'll pack in. What we've done over 12 years is then we say, okay, it's really two-part. You ask people first, and ours, the 9:15 is still smaller. So the first part is move to the 9:15. But really right now, those are pretty comparable. I mean, they're both over 80%, so doesn't really matter. So then it's like, okay, would you move to the overflow room? Mm-hmm. Which, man, on our campus, it just really sucks. I mean, it's just a different. I mean, you got to walk through a maze of a business park our volunteers are awesome. Like, our volunteers are great. They make it a good environment, but it's really just, man, that's hard. Yep. You got kids, you don't even know how to get out of the building, right? And your kids are in some other part. I mean,
and that's the reason that it's our leaders that are
so we're asking leaders to go do that. But man, the big ask is just straight up big boy time. Go to a different service, off time service time, and the reason is because anytime you take yourself out of that main space, your seat will get backfilled with somebody who is new.
Yeah.
And who knows what God is doing in their life? Who knows how long God has been after them? Who knows what kind of brokenness is there? I just tell people, like, man, the strategy of where you sit, if it could really affect gospel change in somebody else's life, isn't that worth it?
Yeah.
And we're going to get into campuses and maybe in just a minute, but Regional North is really that way too, because we don't need a campus a mile from our campus, but we need the seats.
Yeah.
I mean, it's basically a volunteer-led overflow venue a mile down the road,
right?
That is completely filled, and people have done that. They've done. It's really just them going on off service time. Really, I mean, they're moving where they sit because they know most new people are going to come to regional.
All right, so I want to just jump on that thing you just said right there, because there's been a little bit of controversy around some of the language around this when it comes to like the way some of our missionaries, would think about this stuff. When we use a phrase, move for the mission, right? So when we're saying that, we're saying, hey, will you move from where you're sitting now to being seated somewhere else that's not like a primetime spot for the sake of someone being able to come in, bring in their family of 5 and be able to sit together. And, like missionaries that are serving like unreached people groups, they're saying, man, that's not exactly mission, So, I mean, so let's talk about just for a second, how the one actually does relate to the other down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that. I mean, missionaries a lot of times have a bit of a cynical side.
We love them though.
I mean, we love them. I mean, it's saying they could probably say multiple things like that about pastors and stuff, about being belief oriented or whatever. I mean, but the reality is, acting like moving seats is not mission is the same thing as acting like getting made fun of in high school for your faith is not persecution.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Now that, when you want to get real belief oriented and lay it up next to the person who is, in some work camp in North Korea, and you want to make hey, are you telling me these two things are both persecution? It's like, yeah, they are actually. It's a wide degree. I mean, I don't think we're saying that, that there's not more, it's not more difficult or there's not a higher call or something like that, maybe in going to the nations or something. That's really not the discussion. The discussion is when someone makes a decision that is uncomfortable for them because they believe it's going to give somebody else the opportunity to hear about Jesus, come to faith in Jesus, grow in their discipleship, that is mission.
Yeah.
And so if where you sit can affect that, then I would say it's part of the mission.
In our church, when we have somebody that's serving in, say, like South Asia or something like that, I think that we could pretty safely say that's not the first time they've said yes to something.
Totally.
There's been such a series of things that they've said yes to that were in some way inconveniencing their life for the sake of the gospel. And this is just one of those things. Yep. And so that's the reason that we can say, hey, move for the mission, because yes, it's opening up space for someone else to be able to come hear the gospel, but it's also preparing that person's heart for down the road when something else is going to be asked of them.
Yeah, and I think what you were saying about like people that have gone out for Mercy Hill, I think many of them understand what we're saying, what I'm saying by this. Like, that people have to take a lot of steps. We do another good example of what you're saying is we do the generosity ladder. We borrowed this 10 years ago from Nelson Searcy. Like I don't even know what the exact language is, but the idea is, do you tell people on the front end, that the tithe is the floor, not the ceiling? Yes. We have no problem telling people that.
Right.
I mean, we stand up, hey, we talk about a tithe. We used to talk about first fruits. Now we're like, dude, we're talking about the tithe.
Yeah.
A tenth. We're trying to get people to understand in clear language. But then we come right back behind that and we're like, hey, for some of you, that is going to feel like a bridge too far.
Yeah.
You're going to never start because you feel like you can't obey in that. Now, I would challenge them in that.
Sure.
And I would say, hey, I think you can. But if you just can't, do something. Become a first-time giver. Man, do something consistently. I don't care if it's $20 a month. Have it start getting auto-drafted. Even if it's not to a church, send it to the pregnancy network, whatever. Start getting in that habit, right? So we're trying to give people small yeses to get them to the place where they're able to be obedient in the big things that God is calling them to. And I think this is very similar to that. I just can't imagine somebody being willing to go to the nations or go on a church plant that wasn't first willing to move where they sit for their neighbor.
Yeah, yeah. So let's shift to the next rung up the ladder that we're talking about. All right, let's get into the campus world. Mm-hmm. So, I can't remember, was it 2000? Was that like 2016 when we did Clifton Road?
12, 13, 14, probably.
Yeah, something
maybe
like
15,
that.
16, yeah.
So the first time that Mercy Hill went to launch a second campus, Clifton Road was the one. Man, what was some of the pressure that the organization was feeling? Because up until that point, on a Sunday, if you're running 4 services on a Sunday, you can run the same band throughout that entire thing.
Right.
All of those things change now when you go to a different location. And now you're a church in 2 locations. So what are some of the things that have to be multiplied leadership-wise at that level that causes a lot of stress on
the service level, I don't think we ever said that. The service level, you're right. Your band and your preacher can be similar, but and stage hosts and all. Everybody on stage is the same. But then everybody else, it's kind of different, especially,
serve teams and all that
kids,
stuff.
Workers, serve teams, sometimes production stuff. When you go multi-site, though, and what was the stress on our organization was we were just out of room. We needed to do something different. We had done the tons of services thing. We were not willing to continue to multiply more and more and more services, and we didn't think we were going to get a return on that anyway. It was time. So we planted Clifton Road, but at that point, and I remember this, what you're saying is that's a big shift.
Yeah.
And I don't think churches a lot of times realize what kind of shift it's going to be. We used to call it the Clifton Stare. That our staff walked around for like a few months after that whole thing, and they just were kind of like staring off, like a Chris Kyle moment from American, from Sniper.
Yeah.
What's that Sniper movie? And but anyway, they because everything's got to be multiplied. Every single thing. It's not just your volunteer teams. Now it's the band. Now it's your campus pastor team. Now it's your elder team. All that stuff has got to be replicated. And especially for an organization that's going from 1 campus to 2. What you think you have a lot of leaders until you go to 2 campuses and you realize, we're not nearly as stacked as we thought we were, and you got to start replenishing and rebuilding. But it creates a stress. People immediately will get sucked into that vacuum if you have the development side to go with it.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to ask is, do you think there was a greater lag in the vacuum being filled by new leaders when we shifted to planting the Clifton Road campus than when we just multiplied services? Or do you think it was about the same?
Man, this is what I think. I think that it's probably similar, and I think this is where the development side comes in. Man, you go to plant a campus and you're not ready on the development side, you'll fill all the spots, but people won't last.
They burn out.
They can't last. They're burned out, and they just were not equipped to do this. They're not. You're at that point treating people like cogs and just trying to plug them instead of saying like, no, we have enough time and leadership capacity here that we can actually try to fit you in what we think you're going to be good at, what you think you're going to be good at, rather than just, man, we're all hands on deck, go. And then, you can staff it and get it going. I just don't know if people are going to do that for a long time. They're going to end up kind of burning out of that.
So the lag time is probably about the same, but the amount of energy you have to put into the development side of it on that back end to keep people around, that's the key to the whole thing.
Well, I think so. And I also think that a campus inherently has way more fanfare from the stage. When you launch a service, it's almost all ground war.
Yeah.
In terms of like recruiting new people and all that. When you launch a campus, you're actually having campus interest meetings, and next thing you know, you have this, like we're doing for the Ridge right now. I mean, we're now out of the ground war phase of trying to launch the Ridge campus has been 2 months. Now we're finally getting into the public phase, and that's meaning, like yesterday, we had 3 different meetings, 2, 3, and 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, 40, 50 people each coming through. These are people that are not very connected. And so there's this pool of people that we're trying to draw from. Hey man, have you got, get them through the weekend or get them ready to serve on this team.
You're essentially trying to get them to feel the vacuum.
Yeah, and you don't have a lot of that from the stage. You don't have a lot of the air war when you're launching a service that you have on the ground war side.
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's good. Anything else you'd want to say about the campus side of that?
I think the only thing I'd want to say about it, I don't know if this pertains to this discussion, but, you started talking about this stuff a year ago, 18 months ago, and I think we landed pretty fast on like, oh my, that is what the secret sauce of church planning is. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you were going to get into that at all, but, and we've talked about it on this podcast before, and listen, man, people do it different ways. They don't want to do multi-site. They're philosophically against multi-site. That's fine.
Yeah.
There's zero problem with that, man. Go for it. I will say, let's don't be obtuse, though, and throw out these very weak, lame arguments about how multi-site is not a leadership developer, leadership development tool. I hear people say things like, well, I don't want to do multi-site because it doesn't develop preachers because you only got one. And they're not just, these are arguments that are not just wrong, they're backwards.
Right.
And I think they hurt because what we have found is, not just in our church, I mean just nationwide, when you think about the largest, most vibrant church planting networks, which is different than a church affiliating network.
That's right.
All right, if they're actually planting new churches, many of them, dare I say most of them, are born out of multi-site environments. There is a reason for that. That is not a coincidence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, somebody wants to be single site and that's what they want to do forever. I have zero problem with that. Like, man, that is your ministry philosophy. That's fine. Don't throw rocks at the multi-site movement as if it's not what it is. I would say it's the greatest leadership development tool that the church has had in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of when it started, it had 30 years. And, if there's a better tool for leadership development and growth and all that, we would throw multi-site down tomorrow. And we'd pick up that tool because I just want whatever is most pragmatic, sharp tool for the mission. But we don't see a better tool for developing more and more leaders that eventually will plant churches than multi-site.
So I think the key, the biggest difference when you go from services to campuses, the way that people are having to think about reorienting their lives around the gospel. You can look at my own life. All right. So we live in High Point. And so my family is driving from High Point over to the regional campus. All right. That's where our lives are when it comes to church, at the regional campus. And so do you know what we were driving by on the way to regional?
Right.
We were driving by the High Point campus. So, I mean, in one sense, some people, they will make a decision. I'm going to go somewhere that's less convenient to help start another campus. I mean, we've had lots of families that have just, every single campus that we've started, they've been a part of that launch team,
right.
But for us, even though we were choosing, hey, we're going to go to the High Point campus that's closer to where we live, there was still something about, now we're changing a location of where part of our lives are lived. That means an entire people that we're seeing all the time, that's getting ready to change. And we're getting ready to invest in these people over here. Our relationships are getting ready to change. When we go and do things, it's going to be with this group of people instead of this group of people that are over at the regional campus.
Right.
There's something to that. When you begin to think about how people are making decisions about, I'm going to do church in a different geographical location. And that sets up a next ask that we make of people that makes it way easier for them to say, I've already relocated part of my life around the gospel in this space, in this microcosm, like a smaller kind of way. And so when we say, hey, would you be willing to go relocate to help start a church somewhere that needs a church like this? It's a whole lot easier for them to say yes to that when they've said yes to going to a different campus.
Yeah, I mean, campusing is funny because and I remember the study that came out on this, especially when you're talking about video and screens and preaching. New people don't care about that stuff because they don't have a bunch of new to the faith, or not Christians. They don't really care about, a lot of their life's online anyway. They don't really care. They don't know. It's the Christian that's been in the world for a long time. They're the ones that are laying down their preference.
Right.
To go do the campus in where they live. But they're simultaneously becoming a better missionary there because, fans of Jesus have no problem driving 40 minutes. But somebody who ain't a fan, it's like, dude, they're not doing that.
That's right.
And so if we can, for you become a better missionary in High Point, you can invite people from the community, your neighborhood, all that to come in. So it's the Christians who have to kind of get over it.
That's right.
And you're right. They have to make a decision to kind of get over it. Man, another ask, another preference, another comfort laid down so that they can, so they can go and be a better missionary where they are. And that is why there's only a couple of proprietary stats I think we've ever really coined or had. But when I say them, it's like, I think I was talking to Rich Birch about this the other day. People's eyes pop. The way this makes sense to people is when they realize that most of our sent out ones for church planning don't come from the regional campus.
That's right.
Consistently, our other campuses are the ones that have the most missionaries sent out from them.
When you look at just Tanner's team that went to Norfolk, only 3 people out of their entire team came from the regional campus.
Which the regional campus makes up literally over half of the entire church.
That's right. It's always people that have, not always, I don't want to say always, but the vast majority of the people that say yes to going and being part of planting another church somewhere, it's because they've already gone to a different campus.
Yeah, they've said yes, or they started at a new campus and already have from the very beginning. Okay, I'd rather it be live here. I'd rather it be the bigger campus here. But this is better for the mission.
Right.
So they've to me that's one of the things that really helps it pop for people, that it's these small yeses, group level, service level, campus level. That's why the campusing, I think, is such a secret sauce in church planning. It simultaneously develops the people who are going to be in leadership roles. So our church has, we've got like 6 different bands.
Right.
There are 10 different bands. I mean, you could configure from all the people of a church of 3,000. Like that's just ludicrous. I mean, that you could have a church literally double the size in a different model and have half of the amount of people.
Yeah.
So it just inherently produces leaders because of all the multiplication of the service times and all that stuff. And you end up having churches that get planted out of that when the church gets the DNA.
I love that image that you gave at the very beginning of the vacuum. I think I haven't talked about that when we've talked about this ladder and the whole multiplication effect and all that. I think that's going to be a really important part to add in there. But, for me, when I'm out talking to other people from other churches or like leaders from other networks, and the question always comes back, how in the world do you guys get so many people to say yes to what seems to be such radical kinds of things? And I think it comes back to, it's because it's not the first yes that they've said. It's been a series of yeses all along. So even when it gets to the church plant, which that creates more stress, because all of a sudden now you're just seeing people leave your church completely, and that creates a vacuum as well. Yeah,
I think the High Point campus is probably just now beginning to recover from the Norfolk church plant. Travis has done a great job, and they, I can't even, how many leaders they have in the pipeline over there now. It's incredible. But that's coming on the heels of some pretty big heavy hitter people that have been long-time staff members.
Yeah.
We had multiple elders, leave from that one campus.
Leadership-wise, Port City Church in Norfolk kind of gutted the High Point.
It took a big chunk, but we just believe, and look what's happening.
That's right.
We believe, it's like God's math. I think that our High Point campus had the most amount of group apprentices of any of the campuses this past time, probably even over regional, which is half the church. It's God's math, man. You open your hands, you let it go, and what is he going to do? He's going to backfill, and we just got to believe he's going to keep doing that.
I just love that. Hey, this has been a really great conversation, and super grateful to be able to have that with you, and especially to be able to get your vantage point on what this has looked like from the very beginning as all this stuff's about. Thanks a bunch, man.